Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Students, this is our fourth lecture on discourse analysis. And in this lecture, we are going to discuss some of the tools like social languages, discourses, intertextuality, and conversation. Students, in our previous discourse, we looked at various building tasks, that is, different areas of things that we use language to build. We now turn to some tools we can use to analyze the workings of these building tasks in specific instances of language in use. The tools of inquiry I introduce in this lecture are primarily relevant to how people build identities and activities and recognize identities and activities that others are building around them. However, the tools of inquiry introduced here are most certainly caught up with all the other building tasks we discussed in the last chapter as well, and we will see this progressively throughout this book. The tool of inquiry to be discussed in this chapter are described below. Students, the first one is social languages. Students, people use different styles or varieties of languages for different purposes. They use different varieties of language to enact and recognize different identities in different settings. They also use different varieties of language to engage in all the other building tasks discussed in the previous discourse. I will call each such variety a social language. For example, a student studying hornworms might say in everyday language, a variety of language often referred to as vernacular language, something like, hornworms sure vary a lot in how big they get, while the same student might use a more technical variety of language to say or write something like, hornworm growth exhibits a significant amount of variation. The vernacular version is one social language and the technical version is another. Investigating how different social languages are used and mixed is one tool of inquiry for engaging in discourse analysis. Students, the next tool is discourses. People build identities and activities not just through language but by using language together with other stuff that is not language. If you want to get recognized as a street gang member of a certain sort, you have to speak in the right way, but you have to act and dress in the right way as well. You also have to engage or at least behave as if you are engaging in characteristic ways of thinking, acting, interacting, valuing, feeling, and believing. Students, you also have to use or be able to use various sorts of symbols, tools, for example a weapon, and objects, for example street corners, in the right places and at the right times. You cannot just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk as well. The same is true of being a corporate lawyer, marine sergeant, radical feminist, or a regular at the local bar. One and the same person might talk, act, and interact in such a way as to get recognized as a street gang member in one context and in another context, talk, act, and interact in quite different ways so as to get recognized as a gifted student. And indeed, these two identities and their con- concomitant ways of talking, acting, and interacting may well conflict with each other in some circumstances in which different people expect different identities from the person as well as in the person's own mind. I use the term discourse with a capital D for ways of combining and integrating language, actions, interactions, ways of thinking, believing, valuing, and using various symbols, tools, and objects to enact a particular sort of socially recognizable identity. Thinking about the different discourses, a piece of language is another tool for engaging in discourse analysis. Students, the third tool is intertextuality. When we speak or write, our words often allude to or relate to in some fashion other texts or certain types of texts, where by texts I mean words that other people have said or written. For example, Weird magazine once printed a story with this title, The New Phase of the Silicon Age. Tech jobs are fleeing to India faster than ever. You got a problem with that. The sentence, you got a problem with that, reminds us of tough guy talk we have heard in many movies or read in books. It intrigues us that such talk occurs written in a magazine devoted to technology. This sort of cross references to another text or type of text I will refer to as intertextuality. In instances of intertextuality, one spoken or written text alludes to, quotes, or otherwise relates to another one. The next tool is conversations. Students, sometimes when we talk or write, our words do not just allude or relate to someone else's words, as in the case of intertextuality, but to themes, debates, or motives that have been the focus of much talk and writing in some social group with which we are familiar or in our society as a whole. These themes, debates, or motives play a role in how language is interpreted. For example, how do you know that when I tell you smoking is associated with health problems, I mean to say that smoking leads to health problems, and not that health problems lead people to smoke because say their health problems are making them nervous and they are smoking in order to calm down. The most probable meaning for a sentence like writing a will is associated with health problems. You know this because you are well aware of the long running discussions in our society over the ill effects of smoking. Students, I refer to all the talk and writing that has gone on in a specific social group or in society at large around a major theme, debate, or motive as a conversation with a capital C, using the term metaphorically. Of course, most of us today are aware of this societal conversation going on around us about things like creationism, global warming, terrorism, and so on and so forth, through many other issues. To know about these conversations is to know about the various sides one can take in debates about these issues and what sorts of people are usually on each side as members of various social groups and of our society as a whole. We know something about to a great many such conversations. People interpret our language and we interpret theirs, partly through such knowledge. Thinking about the different conversations a piece of language impinges on or relates to is another tool for engaging in discourse analysis. Students, let's start by trying to get at the notion of a big D discourse. We begin with the question of who you are when you speak or write and what you are doing. I repeat the questions: who you are when you speak or write, and what you are doing. When you speak or write anything, you use the resources of English to project yourself as a certain kind of person, a different kind in different circumstances. You also project yourself as engaged in a certain kind of activity, a different kind in different circumstances. If I have no idea who you are and what you are doing, then I cannot make sense of what you have said, written, or done. You project a different identity at a formal dinner party than you do at the family dinner table. And though these are both dinner, they are, however, different activities. The fact that people have differential access to different identities and activities connected to different sorts of status and social goods is a root source of inequality in society. Intervening in such matters can be a contribution to social justice, since different identities and activities are enacted in and through language. The study of language is integrally connected to matter of equity and justice. An oral an oral or written utterance has meaning then only if and when it communicates a who and a what. What I mean by a who is a socially situated identity, the kind of person one is seeking to be and enact here and now. What I mean by a what is a socially situated activity that the utterance helps to constitute. Such identities and activities are, of course, two of the building tasks we have discussed in our previous discourses. Students, in today's class I am also sharing a book with you people. You must read it, and in next class I would send you another book of critical discourse analysis. And meanwhile, we would discuss the application of critical discourse analysis on novels, poetry, short stories, etc. Okay, students, see you in next class.